I mean, clearly the U.S. is growing tired of the Middle East and of also its position within the Gulf. And as rightly mentioned by the ambassador, they have become self-sufficient. It is less of an issue for them today. But I don't see the U.S. ever withdrawing altogether from the Middle East, partly because of Israel. There are other strategic areas of interest, including the Suez Canal, the overall stability of oil market, the stability of even China's own trade, etc., from where they borrow most of their money and so on. So there are broader issues that would keep them engaged. Now, they will definitely, and we could see it, and in fact the Syrians are paying the price at the moment of them taking a less interventionist approach. The last thing they want is lose more soldiers in the Middle East and so on. So the nature of the intervention, I think, will change. And that is where they would be looking for other actors to come and do that side of, soldiers on the ground, interventions, ships in the seas, etc., to try and secure the region. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Arab states will want that to happen, and this is partly why Saudi's growing confidence is there now, and they've been allowed the chance to try and express it through the young Minister of Defense and the King and so on. And maybe this is the way we'll be heading, is that they will say, look, well, we are powerful enough to protect our own interest, and we'd like maybe to try it for once. All we need is expedited sort of support in terms of weapons and technology and so on. Now, when it comes to India, I disagree slightly, because I think India needs to take a much broader view on West Asia than the US has done traditionally. And I think also India needs to be less materialistic about it and keep in mind its cultural, civilizational link, and the religious aspect of it is important to India. If the sectarian issue continues in the Middle East, I can't see, but it will be exported to other Muslim communities, including in India. I mean, yesterday we went to Agra, and I was so impressed by, was it the day before yesterday, by the level of tolerance and mix that exists at the moment. Now, you wait until some of our extreme thinking comes in that only sees one single view of religion and so on and so on. All of that could be potentially a threat within India, as it could be in China with its multi-million Muslim community. So I think both need to worry about it. Economically, it's an issue that can be dealt with. Oil supplies, whether you can diversify your sources. There are many more suppliers coming into the market at the moment in the coming few years. Off the coast of Mozambique, the largest reserve has just been discovered, and so on. So I don't think that is going to be the central point. It's more about people, culture, religious aspects that really needs to define the agenda for India in the coming few years. And to go back to the issue of the development of relationship with Israel, I think a lot of careful thinking needs to go into this visit, in orchestrating it, in conducting it. The Middle East is a landmine. It's a minefield, basically. And visiting Israel is not a small step. And the Israelis are very, very good in exploiting every single move. I mean, you can learn a lot from the Pope and everybody else who went there on a visit. They will take you, one road makes a huge difference. Where you walk, who you talk to, how you shake your hands, who you shake hands with, etc., etc. And the Arab world will be watching. The Arab world has been spoiled by a very good relationship with India over the last 50 years that they've taken, I think, for granted. We still live in the days of the Cold War and the non-alliance, and India taking a lead on this, and the days of Nasser and Nehru and all the people. You mention India and they go, oh yeah, it's a friend of the Arabs. Now this trip, I think, will change a lot of that perception, and this is why it needs to be orchestrated extremely carefully from a regional perspective, but more so from a micro-local perspective. And finally, on the issue of Daesh. I personally think the importance of Daesh has been exaggerated, really, in many ways, and the power of Daesh. Daesh is thriving because of the failure of any system around it. When these people, Daesh, took over areas, they were welcomed initially by some of the Sunni tribes because they brought a degree of security that people have longed for 7 years. And it reminded me a lot of the story of the Taliban in the early days of their rise in Afghanistan. Now it became a global issue following the assassination massacre of the American journalist. Now, very few Arab states have taken careful analysis, independent analysis from their perspective as to what would be the result of this. To the extent that really were driven by what the US wanted them to do, and that is to provide soldiers on the ground to be part of a battle that they don't want to lose their own people. And that perspective is now changing. It's been more than a year, and you go and they're still optimistic that they're winning a war against a group of gangsters over a year now. You will never win it the way through the bombing campaign. And I think people are asking serious questions on the ground. That you've singled out Daesh, but you have not singled out the equally terrifying groups that are fighting against Daesh and against other Sunni groups in the name of Shia Islam. That as long as those groups have a free reign in Iraq in particular, but also now in Syria, you can't really argue much against the ideology that Daesh is trying to spread and so on. So there are interesting things that are happening. I feel that India has much more to offer. I hope India will offer more, even in terms of the software of how we do politics. And how do you do politics in a multicultural, a multi-religious, complex society? We don't really know that. We had it only done by dictators who would dictate, you do this. If you look any different, all you need to do is just to stay out. The majority will do this, the minority in power will do this, and so on. And those are all areas where I'm very hopeful that greater interaction between India and West Asia and the Arab countries and the East will probably introduce some of those models that are much more appropriate, much closer to our culture and religious standing than probably we have been getting from the West.
Lots of very, very interesting points there. Sorry, I'm just trying to
the one that works.
make this. Is this not working now? Lots of interesting points there. But I guess a couple of things I wanted to raise, and then we'll sort of start looking at how India might and whether India should. And I'll turn to Professor Deatle and Ambassador Chakravarti on that. But I think certainly your assessment of the challenges posed by Daesh at one level, you're much closer to the ground there, and you really have that sense. But here, looking at Ramadi, the fall of Mosul, etc., there's almost this perception that are you going to have the Talibanization of Iraq, but at a much larger scale? Is it only a matter of time before Baghdad falls?
I doubt it. Oh, sorry, is it for me?
No, I'm being deliberately provocative there a little bit.
Well, now if you talk to people from Baghdad, they say Baghdad has been turned the Shia way. I mean, the Sunnis see themselves very much as a minority within the city, so I don't think it will fall to ISIS. But there are some serious people who provide continuous support to ISIS in the region, who see ISIS as a buffer zone between Shia and Sunni in the region. Recently, Saudi Arabia, interestingly, proposed a slightly different model, but it follows more or less the same geography. They're calling for the possibility of Kurdistan. Now, Kurdistan is, for the first time ever, that you hear some senior Saudi official proposing the idea of a united independent Kurdistan made up of regions from Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran. Now that is within that thinking of a buffer zone between Iran and the rest of the Middle East. And that, of course, the hope is to be less radical than an ISIS state. But ultimately, I think the fundamental problem is that the Middle East has had 50 years of failed development, failed governance. People are absolutely desperate. They went out the streets in 2010 hoping that there would be some change. Nothing happened, things got worse. So you speak to communities and they would like the minimum of survival, security, etc., etc. And in some cases, ironically, they see that in the Daesh state. Daesh state, despite all the brutality that they have displayed a greater degree of efficiency in terms of governance in the areas that they control than some of the liberated areas in Syria that are supported by the international community. They still cannot get their heads together to have a mayor or to collect garbage or to open a school or open a clinic. Now, these other people do. And that ability of getting the balance of civic life, if you like, we don't agree with it, but it is taking place. And some people are seeing as a potential hope in the region. And I think we need to keep that in mind and not just follow what some analysts will say, oh, this is a huge, it's going to be a disaster for the whole region. And so on.
Independent Kurdistan. As far as Iraq is concerned, trust me, it already does exist de facto. And it has been existing de facto for nearly a decade. It's there.
So will India recognize it?
But what Saudis are saying is a fantasy. Turkey's Kurds have proven themselves 2 days back. They have sort of turned the election results 180 degrees around. So why would the Turkish Kurds want to join up with Iraqi and Syrian Kurds? That is not going to happen. As far as Iraqi Kurds are concerned, yes, they are there. Now, turmoil in West Asia and challenges for us. 3 speakers have spoken about the forthcoming visit of our Prime Minister to Israel. Prime Minister Modi's government has just completed 1 year. And those who were swooning over his performance in last year were repeatedly saying, look how many countries he has visited and how our clout in the world has gone up. Those who were very critical were also looking at his foreign trips and saying, why doesn't he stay home and do things here? So, foreign trips of the Prime Minister was very much in the spotlight. However, in that 1 year when he was going from this country to that and the other, he completely avoided West Asia. Completely. And now he is proposing to go to Israel, his first visit to the region. I think it is a very ill-advised decision. Why? Because every single world leader who does visit Israel does have a little bit of sensitivity to make a stopover, either going in or coming out in Gaza. All flight schedules to Israel for all world leaders, as far as I know, does have Gaza on the flight schedule. Now, going to Gaza is always a stopover. It is only a photo op. Everyone knows that. Business is done in Israel, but at the same time, you show up in Gaza so that you go to the Palestinians and you go to Israel. Our Prime Minister is going to make it a stand-alone visit to Israel, the first visit to the region, and I don't think it augurs very well for our interests in the region. Let me now take up one more point, short point.
Briefly, yes.
Briefly, yeah. the Daesh and the challenge to India. We are very low profile, and I am very happy that we are low profile, and we have been successful in getting our nurses back from the Daesh's hold, which was a very big achievement, looking at what the Daesh can do and are doing. What we read in the newspapers is that Syria and Iraq are far away from us. Not many Indians are in Syria or Iraq. We don't buy oil from there. We don't get remittances from there. So it's not as if it's happening in one of the Gulf states. So doesn't matter. Let them do what they are doing. We will be keeping a distance, which is okay. But what is going on in the Daesh territory is not only close to us, it is inside the country. It is inside the country. A few Indians have gone there to fight with the Daesh, and they have been caught. Some have returned. Some probably have come back to sort of establish a franchise of Daesh in the country. Ayman al-Zawahiri was already talking about an Indian franchise for the Al-Qaeda. But one more detail I would give, and then I'll complete. 2 kilometers from here, 2 kilometers from the IIC is a place called Karbala. That is where the Shia mosque is. So if the Sunnis from here, the radicalized Sunnis from here, are individually fleeing to go and fight for the Daesh, and trust me what I am going to say, 30,000 Shias have submitted their passports for the Iraqi visas. They want to go and fight Daesh. Why? Because they are afraid that Daesh will destroy the Shia shrines in Iraq. Now, so far, Shias and Sunnis in this country have been fine with each other. During Muharram time, some disputes do take place and very localized in Lucknow. We don't have the situation that there is in Pakistan, fratricide. And I'm sure this will not happen in this country, but we need to be alert. Daesh is not far away. Thank you.
See, my problem is that I come from the inside, and I'm not an academic who looks at public sources of information. And so I have to be very careful in what I say. Let me begin with the Israeli issue. We've had a very close, and wary and calibrated relationship with Israel. I served in Israel from 95 to 99. We opened the mission in 1992. And number one, let's not shy away from it. The BJP has had a very close relationship with Israel. One of the first visitors I received when I was in Israel was Lal Krishna Advani. So there has been a string of visitors. They have maintained that relationship for a very long time. For whatever reasons, I shall not go into that. And we have, of course, been very careful. No Prime Minister has yet visited. Even Atal Bihari Vajpayee was asked to visit, but he didn't. So India has had a very calibrated relationship with Israel. And I cannot understand this argument about why India should not have a relationship with Israel. Egypt has a relationship with Israel, Jordan has, Qatar has, and now even the Saudis have. They are collaborating on Daesh. For some reason, Israel feels that Daesh is a good thing for its own interests. And because it will fight Iran, or it will get Syria into trouble, or whatever. In their strategic perception, I can assure you that Saudis and Israelis are collaborating on helping Daesh. And the US is watching it, and with folded arms or whatever. So that is about Israel. And let's not forget, India has huge interests in Israel. terms of our defense, our technology, and other relationships. And there are 80,000 Indian Jews in Israel. How many people know that? They are settled, they are prosperous, and they are doing business with India in many, many areas, mostly sort of in areas like agriculture and technology-based, companies. So we have an important relationship with Israel that has developed over the last, let's say, two decades or so. And I think Prime Minister Modi is simply accepting the fact that it's now high time that we recognize that relationship by his visit. Now, you have seen the Defense Minister of Israel also come to India for the first time. We have never invited him, but for the first time, he came to India. So slowly you are seeing a process of, as the Defense Minister himself said, bringing it out of the closet. It is there, but we have not given it the political sort of stamp and relationship. So I think that is happening, and it should happen, in my view. This is not to say that we should forget about the Palestinians and others. And by the way, don't assume that Prime Minister Modi is only going to Israel. Please do not assume. I don't think it has been fixed or it has been settled. And of course, I don't think he's going to visit Gaza, by the way, Professor. I think nobody visits Gaza these days. They all go to Ramallah. Because we had opened the office in Gaza, but then that is today history. And, so that might happen, or there will be some more aspects of it. One last comment on the domestic, very brief domestic aspect of the Shia Sunni, what you talked about. And I am supremely confident that there will be no Shia Sunni rights in India. And whatever little people have gone. By the way, some of the stories that were brought back is that Daesh actually used some of these fellows who landed up there for basically cooking and cleaning. And they said these Indians can't fight, so there's no point in giving them guns, and so I don't think that. And they came back pretty disappointed. And I'm sure they must have spread the stories. If you go there, you'll be put to cleaning and cooking. So I don't think many will go, and I'm quite confident that's not going to happen.
Discussion.
I think an added dimension to potentially Modi's visit to Israel is that he's visiting it in a particular time and dealing with a particular prime minister who managed to alienate the Americans as well. I mean, the way Netanyahu handled President Obama is very much seen as an insult by quite a considerable side of American politics, including Jewish Americans. So that adds to the complexity and the choice.
The Republicans loved it.
Yeah.
But they're not in power yet.
But they're in Congress.
There's a risk there of kind of putting India in a particular corner with a particular label of with a group that is ultra nationalist, ultra this, ultra that, which they probably could do without, given that their economic relations and everything else is going anyway. Why would you want to bring it out in the public this particular moment at this juncture of Middle Eastern politics?